Howdy partners, I've got a special treat for y'all this holiday season. I will not be yelling at my prospective audience for this video, because thrown in my face was some of the dumbest, most dishonest speech to ever leave an ostensible human's mouth while I watched Jeremy Crawford, interviewed by Todd Kembrick, talk about my favorite fantasy class.
Surge. And you can expect when we get to the mage classes and specifically to the sorcerer, we're going to address that. And you also saw in the previous Unearthed Arcana that we addressed that in the ranger. Because one of the main issues with especially the ranger's first level features in the 2014 Player's Handbook is they relied way too heavily on DM buy-in. That if your DM really bought into how they functioned, your ranger could feel at first level super effective and later on feel like you had something to contribute that others didn't.
Right.
But if your DM didn't buy in, you could end up with a situation where you felt like those features didn't even exist in terms of actual play.
Right.
And so we've addressed that in the ranger. Luckily, that isn't an issue for most of the features in the game, but when we come across them, we want to make sure one of our design...
Well, what do you know? All this time I've been playing the Ranger all wrong. We all have been playing the Ranger all wrong. All our DMs had to do, all my DM had to do in my very first campaign of D&D was to put my favorite enemy in front of me, and I would have loved it. But now that I think back, my DM did put my favorite enemy in front of me. In fact, there were two Rangers in the party, shout out to Caleb. We both shared a favorite enemy. We both fought that favorite enemy, but each time we excitedly glanced down at our character sheets to see what would change in this particular encounter, we always came away disappointed. Why is that? Why didn't we notice how much more effective we were against undead and humanoids? Why did it take the revised Ranger Unearthed Arcana giving me a +4 bonus to damage against my favorite enemy to finally feel like I had a specialty? Why did it take my very own rebuilt Ranger to fulfill the fantasy of someone who was generally effective, but additionally effective against a specific foe? See, now I know the common wisdom around playing a Ranger was always astroturfed by WOTC. The idea that all it takes to enjoy a Ranger is the inclusion of your favorite enemy was not some misguided cope on behalf of an admittedly confused player base. It came straight from the top. From about 2015 onwards, everyone knew for certain that if your DM did not include your favorite enemy, you would be missing out on real fun, that it made Rangers a high-risk, high-reward player choice that for some reason nobody ever really thought was mechanically impressive. Why were there so many revisions over the years? Why didn't we like the Ranger? Did the entire player base really spend the better part of a decade never coming across their favorite enemy? Or was something else wrong? Who are y'all gonna believe? Your player's handbook or your own lion eyes? Alright, we need to set a baseline here for a moment. What does the 5th edition Ranger look like? What was this mysterious effectiveness your table could stumble into by accident? The feature Jeremy Crawford mentions is called Favorite Enemy, and it's the core, along with Natural Explorer, of the Ranger class. These two features and their improvements take up 6 out of the 24 features a Ranger will receive. If you don't count ability score improvements, it's 6 out of 19. Take subclass features out of that, or archetypes, and you're looking at 6 out of 15. If you had to pick out the meatiest chunk of features in the Ranger, this would be it, but what is it? Favorite Enemy. Beginning at first level, you have significant experience studying, tracking, hunting, and even talking to a certain type of enemy. They list out the 5th edition creature types here and add a special clause for humanoids following that. You have advantage on wisdom, survival, checks to track your favorite enemies, as well as on intelligence checks to recall information about them. When you gain this feature, you also learn one language of your choice that is spoken by your favorite enemies, if they speak one at all. You choose one additional favorite enemy, as well as an associated language, at 6th and 14th level. As you gain levels, your choices should reflect the types of monsters you've encountered on your adventures. Advantage on 2 knowledge checks, an extra language, in 5th edition design terms, and I mean the terms of the 5th edition designers, we would call this a ribbon ability. Ribbon abilities are features which do not interact with the core progression of the game. They are not intended to contribute to combat, the gain of experience, acquiring loot, or otherwise making your character useful. When they do appear in the game, it's by accident, and they're generally not helpful anyways. Just as a note, just to set a baseline once more, we're going to compare this to the Divine Smite feature of the Paladin. Starting at 2nd level, when you hit a creature with a melee weapon attack, you can expend 1 spell slot to deal radiant damage to the target, in addition to the weapon's damage. The extra damage is 2d8 for a 1st level spell slot, plus 1d8 for each spell level higher than 1st, to a maximum of 5d8. The damage increases by 1d8 if the target is an undead or a fiend, to a maximum of 6d8. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the difference between a ribbon ability and a class feature. It's also an example of how to handle specialization well. The Paladin is generally effective, regarded as one of the strongest classes in the game. Nobody complains if fiends and undead are missing from a campaign. Paladin players are just even happier when those creature types do show up. It's the difference between specialization and trolling your players. So what did the OneD&D Ranger replace favorite enemy with? Well, it takes the spell Hunter's Mark, a staple of the 5th edition Ranger, and removes the concentration tag. Think about this for a moment, folks. The text of Hunter's Mark closely matches the class feature. Folks on the dev team have said as much for at least half a decade or more. WOTC removed concentration for one of the multiple hundreds of spells which have no business making use of it. Good on them. Except they didn't. They made this conditional on your being a ranger. It didn't cost them anything to get rid of concentration on that spell, mind you. Removing it just opened up the ranger to cast more things, like Hail of Thorns, another spell that shouldn't be tagged with concentration given the spell just produces a tiny area of effect damage one single time. And what did the ranger lose from its 5th edition version? Well, it lost the original text of Favorite Enemy and Natural Explorer. These were ribbon abilities, but hey, that ain't a problem, right? Well, wrong. You see, WOTC had the better part of a decade to correctly interpret the actionable negative feedback they were receiving. They had plenty of time to acknowledge how they already handled specialization for 2 other classes and apply it to the Ranger. Forget the hope of turning exploration-focused ribbons into a supportive mode of play. WOTC would rather just have you forget they promised it to begin with. The thing Ranger players really lost was the chance for a better game, and all it would have taken for them to get it was WOTC being honest.